The desert stretched endless before me, a sea of golden sand that shimmered under the midday sun. Its heat a weight on my shoulders, a breath in my lungs. I stood at the edge of the quarry, my bare feet dusted with grit, my hands rough from the stone I'd carried since dawn. The Nile was a distant ribbon, its waters glinting like a promise. But here, in the heart of the plateau, there was only rock, sweat, and the quiet hum of purpose. I was young, barely a man, my back strong but my heart still soft, untested by the years. They called me a worker, one of thousands, but I felt like something more. A piece of a dream too vast to hold, a dream carved in stone and pointed to the stars. The Great Pyramid was rising, its base already wide and steady, a mountain born of human hands. I'd heard the elders speak of it, their voices low, their eyes bright with something like reverence. It was for the king, they said, for Khufu, whose name was whispered like a prayer. His soul, his Ka, would live forever, carried to the gods on this monument, its shape a ladder to the heavens. I didn't understand it all, not then, not yet, but I felt it, the pull of something greater, like the current of the Nile when I waded too deep as a boy. The pyramid was not just stone. It was a bridge, a path, a truth we were building together. My task was simple: carry the blocks from the quarry to the ramps, where others would haul them upward, layer by layer. The stone was heavy, its edges biting into my palms, but I moved with the rhythm of the others, our steps a silent song, our breaths a shared pulse. There were no machines, no wheels, no tools beyond the chisels and levers we wielded with care. The elders said it was better this way. Our hands, our strength, our will were offerings to the gods, as sacred as the incense burned in the temples. I wondered, sometimes, why we didn't seek easier ways, but the question faded in the heat, in the work, in the sight of the pyramid growing, its sides sloping upward, sharp and sure, like the rays of Ra himself. The overseer, a man with a voice like thunder and eyes that saw everything, watched us from a rise, his staff tapping the ground in time with our steps. He was kind, in his way, though his words were sharp, urging us faster, stronger, better. For the king, he'd say, his gaze lifting to the pyramid, its peak still a dream above us. For the gods. I nodded, my head bowed, my hands tight around the stone, but my thoughts wandered. Why this shape, this pointed form that seemed to pierce the sky? Why not a square, a dome, a tower? I'd seen the old tombs, the mastabas, flat and low, but this was different, a chasm of stone that reached for something beyond my grasp. At midday we rested, the sun of fire above us, the air thick with dust and the faint tang of sweat. I sat with the others, our backs against the quarry's edge, our hands cradling bowls of barley porridge, warm and thick, passed from the women who cooked in the shadow of the ramps. One of the older workers, a man named Ta, his fingers gnarled but steady, leaned close, his voice a low murmur, like the wind over the dunes. "You're new," he said, his eyes narrowing, not unkindly. "You wonder why it's a pyramid, don't you?" I nodded, my mouth full, my heart quickening. He smiled, a cracked, knowing thing, and pointed to the sky. "Look, the sun's rays, how they fall. That's the shape. That's the path for the king's Ka to climb." I followed his gaze, squinting against the light, and saw it. The way the sun's beams broke through the haze, slanting downward, sharp and bright, like the sides of the pyramid itself. My breath caught, not from the heat, but from the simplicity of it, the truth that felt so close, so real. The pyramid was the sun's light made stone, a path for the king to rise, to join Ra in his eternal journey. I thought of the stars at night, how they seemed to hang just above the pyramid's growing peak, and wondered if they, too, were part of this, a map for the king's soul, a guide to the gods. Ta spoke again, his voice softer now, almost a whisper. "Our hands build it because the gods demand it. Machines would be cold, lifeless. Our sweat, our breath, our prayers, they live in the stone. That's why it will stand forever." I listened, my porridge forgotten, my eyes on the pyramid, its edges sharp against the sky. I thought of my village, my mother weaving baskets by the Nile, my father fishing in the dawn's quiet. They'd sent me here, their hands on my shoulders, their voices steady. Work for the king, for the gods. I hadn't understood then, but now, sitting in the quarry's shadow, I felt it. The connection, the purpose, the belief that our hands were shaping something eternal. The overseer called us back, his staff a sharp crack against the stone. And I stood, my body aching but my heart light. The pyramid was more than a tomb, I realized, more than a monument. It was a story, a prayer, a promise that the king's Ka would live again, that our work would echo through the ages. I lifted another block, its weight familiar now, and joined the line of workers, our steps steady, our voices silent but our spirits loud. The sun burned above, the pyramid rose before us, and I felt the shape of it in my bones, the chasm of stone that pointed to the heavens, built by hands that believed in forever. Are you still here with me? Can you feel it, the heat of the sand, the weight of the stone? And perhaps that's why the pyramid was shaped like the sun's rays, to carry the king's soul on wings of light. The dawn was a whisper of pink and gold, creeping over the horizon as I trudged toward the quarry. The air still cool, the sand soft under my feet. My hands were already rough, calloused from days of gripping stone, but they felt alive, as if the pyramid's purpose had seeped into my skin. The great structure loomed ahead, its base broader now, its sides sloping upward, a silent giant that seemed to draw the light itself. I could hear the hum of the workers already, hundreds, thousands, their voices a low murmur, their steps a steady rhythm, like the Nile's pulse carrying life to the fields. I joined them, my place among the lines, my shoulders ready for the weight of another block, my heart caught in the quiet awe of what we were building. The quarry was alive with movement, the clink of chisels sharp against the morning's stillness. I worked alongside a boy younger than me, his eyes wide and bright, his hands still soft from a life not yet hardened. His name was Ammonius, and he grinned as he hefted a smaller stone, his breath quick, his excitement a spark in the dust. "It's for the king," he said, his voice high, eager, as if the words alone could lift the block. I nodded, my lips curving, but my thoughts were on the pyramid, on its shape, its purpose. The elder's words echoed in my mind. Ta's voice, low and certain, speaking of the sun's rays, of the Ka's climb to the gods. I looked at the structure, its edges sharp against the sky, and felt it again, the truth of it, the shape that was more than stone. We carried our blocks to the ramps, the long slopes of earth and mud brick that curled around the pyramid like the arms of a mother. The ramps were our path, the way we lifted the stones higher, layer by layer, toward the heavens. There were no machines, no ropes beyond the simple ones we knotted ourselves, no tools but the levers and sledges we pushed with our own strength. I'd wondered, in the quiet moments, why we didn't find other ways. Ways to ease the ache in our backs, the burn in our hands. But as I pushed my block onto the sledge, the wood creaking under its weight, I felt the answer in my bones. Our work was a prayer, our sweat a gift, our hands the voice of our devotion. Machines could not carry the king's Ka. Only we could. Ammonius chattered as we worked, his words a stream that flowed like the Nile. "My father says the pyramid is a star on earth," he said, his eyes on the peak, still far above us. "He says it points to the gods, so the king can find them." I glanced at him, his face flushed with effort, and felt a warmth in my chest. He was young, but he felt it too, the connection, the purpose. I nodded, my voice soft. "Your father's right. It's a path, a ladder for the king's soul." Ammonius grinned, his hands tighter on the rope, and we pulled together, the sledge sliding over the sand, the stone steady, our steps in sync. The overseer passed by, his staff tapping the ground, his eyes scanning our work. He paused, watching us, and I felt a flicker of pride when he nodded, his lips twitching in something like approval. "Good," he said, his voice gruff but warm. "The gods see you." I straightened, my chest swelling, and glanced at Ammonius, who beamed as if he'd been blessed by Ra himself. The overseer moved on, his staff a steady beat, and I felt the rhythm of the quarry shift, the workers moving faster, their voices quieter, their purpose sharper. We were not just building a tomb. We were building a bridge to eternity, a shape that mirrored the sun, a path that carried the king to the gods. At midday we rested again, the sun a fierce eye above us, the air thick with heat and dust. I sat with Ammonius, our backs against a pile of cut stones, our hands cradling bowls of water and bread. The pyramid loomed before us, its sides gleaming, its peak a promise still out of reach. I thought of Ptah's words, of the sun's rays, and looked at the sky, where the light fell in sharp, slanting beams, just as he'd said. The pyramid was their echo, I realized, its shape a reflection of the divine, a way to make the gods' light tangible, eternal. I wondered if the king, Khufu, knew what we were building for him, if he felt our hands, our hearts, our belief as we carved this path for his Ka. Ammonius nudged me, his voice low, almost shy. Do you think the king will see it? When he's with the gods, will he know we did this? I looked at him, his eyes wide, his face open, and felt a pang in my chest. I thought of my own village, my mother's baskets, my father's nets, the life I'd left to come here. I thought of the workers around us, their hands, their sweat, their quiet prayers. He'll know, I said, my voice steady, though I wasn't sure how I knew. The Ka carries everything, our work, our hope. He'll feel it. Ammonius nodded, his grin returning, and I felt a thread of connection between us, between all of us, binding us to the pyramid, to the king, to the gods. The afternoon wore on, the heat heavy, the work relentless, but I moved with a new lightness, my hands sure, my steps steady. The pyramid was growing, its sides sharper, its shape clearer, a chasm of stone that pointed to the heavens. I thought of the stars again, how they'd look tonight, hanging above the peak, guiding the king's Ka. I thought of the Nile, its endless flow, and the cycles it carried, life, death, rebirth. Our hands, our work, our belief were part of that cycle. I realized a way to make the king's life eternal, to make our own lives mean something more. As the sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the plateau, I looked at the pyramid, its edges glowing in the evening light, and felt a quiet certainty settle into me. We were building more than a tomb. We were building a truth, a shape that held the sun's light, a path that carried the king's soul. And we did it with our hands, our hearts, our hope, because that was the only way to make it real. Is it getting quieter inside your thoughts? Can you see it? The pyramid's rise, the sun's golden rays? And perhaps that's why our hands carried the stone, to build a ladder for the king's soul to climb. The stars were a blanket above the plateau, their light soft and steady. As I sat by the workers' camp, the pyramid a dark silhouette against the night. The air was cool now, a relief after the day's heat, carrying the faint scent of smoke from the fires where bread baked and barley simmered. My hands rested in my lap, still aching from the stones I'd carried, but the pain felt distant, like a memory softened by time. Around me, the camp hummed with quiet life, workers talking in low voices, laughter rising like sparks. The clink of clay cups passed hand to hand. Ammonius was beside me, his knees drawn up, his eyes fixed on the pyramid, its peak lost in the darkness, as if he could see its finished form in his mind. The day had been long, the ramps slick with sand, the stones heavier as the sun climbed higher. We'd moved in rhythm, our steps steady, our breaths a shared song, pulling the sledges up the slopes, the pyramid growing layer by layer. I'd felt the weight of it, not just the stone, but the purpose, the belief that every block was a step for the king's Ka, a path to the gods. Ptah's words about the sun's rays lingered in me, and I'd caught myself glancing at the sky, tracing the light's slant, seeing the pyramid's shape mirrored in the beams that fell across the plateau. But tonight, under the stars, new questions stirred, quiet but persistent, like the Nile's current beneath its calm surface. An older woman, her hair streaked with gray, her hands scarred from years of mixing mortar, sat across the fire, her eyes catching the flame's glow. She was called Neith, a keeper of stories, her voice a thread that wove the camp together after dark. Ammonius nudged me, his whisper eager. "Ask her," he said, his chin jutting toward the pyramid. "Ask why it's like that, Why we build it with our hands. I hesitated, my tongue heavy, but Neetha's gaze found mine warm and knowing, as if she'd heard the question before I spoke it. I swallowed, my voice low. Why the pyramid's shape? Why no machines, only us? Neith smiled, a slow, cracked thing, and leaned forward, her hands cradling a cup of water, the firelight dancing on her face. The shape, she began, her voice soft but clear, like the wind over the dunes, is the Benben, the sacred stone, the first mound that rose from the waters of chaos when the world began. I blinked, the word unfamiliar, but her eyes held mine, pulling me into the story. The gods stood on that mound, creating life, creating order. The pyramid is its echo, a mound of stone that points to the sky, where the king's Ka will rise to join them. Its sides slope to meet the stars, to carry him to Ra's light, to make him eternal. I thought of the pyramid, its sharp edges, its peak reaching upward, and saw it anew. Not just as the sun's rays, but as something older, deeper, a shape born of the world's first breath. Ammonius' eyes were wide, his breath quick, and I felt his excitement spark in me, a warmth that pushed back the night's chill. Neetha's voice continued, steady, like the Nile's flow. The hands that build it, your hands, mine, all of ours, they're the gods' hands too. Machines have no soul, no Ka. They can't carry the king's spirit. Our work, our sweat, our prayers, they live in the stone, binding it to the divine. That's why we labor, why we sing, why we believe. Her words sank into me, heavy and warm, like the stone I carried each day. I thought of the ramps, the sledges, the chants we sang to keep our steps in time. I thought of the workers around me, their faces lined with dust, their hands rough but strong, their laughter a thread that held us together. We weren't just building a tomb. We were building a story, a truth, a path for the king's soul, and our hands were the only way to make it real. I glanced at Ammonius, his face glowing, and felt a quiet pride, a connection to something vast, like the stars above us, endless and eternal. Neith leaned back, her cup empty, her eyes drifting to the pyramid. The king's Ka will know, she said, almost to herself. It will feel the hands that shaped its path, the hearts that believed in its journey. I nodded, though she wasn't looking, my chest tight with a feeling I couldn't name. I thought of my mother, weaving by the Nile, her hands steady, her faith quiet but sure. I thought of my father, his nets cast in the dawn, his voice humming a song for the gods. They'd sent me here to be part of this, to lend my hands to the pyramid, to the king, to the stars. The fire crackled, its light fading, and the camp grew quieter, the workers settling into sleep, their breaths soft against the night. Ammonius yawned, his head dipping, but his eyes still on the pyramid, as if he could will it higher. I smiled, ruffling his hair, and stood, my body aching but my heart light. The pyramid was out there, waiting for us, its shape a promise, its stones a prayer. I looked at the stars, their light a guide, and felt the Benben in my mind. The mound, the beginning, the shape that held the world's first light. Our hands were building it again, I realized, not just for the king, but for all of us, for the order that kept the chaos at bay. I lay down, the sand cool beneath me, the stars a canopy above. The pyramid was in my dreams that night, its sides glowing, its peak touching the heavens, and I felt my hands in the stone, my heart in the light, my soul in the story we were telling. The king's Ka would rise, I believed, because we made it so, because our hands, our hope, our love shaped a path that could never fade. Are your eyes getting heavy yet? Can you hear it? The fire's crackle, the stars' silent song? And perhaps that's why the pyramid was a Benben, to hold the world's beginning in its stone. The dawn broke gently, a thin veil of light spilling over the plateau, touching the pyramid with a glow that made its stones seem alive. I walked from the camp, my sandals sinking into the sand, the air cool and sharp with the promise of morning. My hands were stiff, the calluses hard now, but they moved with a quiet certainty, as if they knew the stone's weight before I lifted it. The pyramid loomed ahead, its sides steeper, its peak closer, though still a dream above us. The hum of the workers was softer today, their voices hushed, their steps deliberate, as if the structure itself demanded reverence. I felt it too, a weight in my chest, not heavy but deep, like the silence before a prayer. Ammonius was at my side, his chatter quieter now, his eyes tracing the pyramid's edges, where the stones fit so tightly I could barely see the seams. We'd worked together for days, our rhythm steady, our hands pulling the same ropes, pushing the same sledges up the ramps. But today felt different, the air charged with something unspoken, a sense that we were nearing a moment, a milestone in the king's path to the gods. The overseer had spoken last night, his voice low by the fire, of the casing stones. Smooth, white limestone from across the Nile, soon to be laid, to make the pyramid shine like a star. I thought of them now, imagining the structure gleaming, its sides a mirror for Ra's light, its shape a perfect benben, pointing to the heavens. We reached the quarry, the clink of chisels already ringing, the dust rising in soft clouds that caught the dawn's glow. Ta was there, his gnarled hands steady as he shaped a block, his eyes narrowed in focus. He glanced up as we approached, his smile brief but warm, like the first touch of sunlight on my skin. "You're stronger now," he said, his voice rough, his gaze on my hands. I nodded, flexing my fingers, feeling the truth of it. The stones no longer bit as deeply, the weight no longer stole my breath. But it wasn't just my hands that had changed. It was my heart, my understanding, my place in the story we were building. Ammonius and I took our places, lifting a block onto a sledge, the wood creaking under its weight. We pulled together, our steps in sync, the ramp rising before us, its slope gentle but long. The other workers moved around us, their chants a low hum, their ropes taut, their faces lined with dust but bright with purpose. I thought of Neitha's story, the benben, the mound that held the world's beginning, and felt it in the stone we carried, in the pyramid's shape, in the way it seemed to pull the sky closer. The structure was more than a tomb, I realized. It was a creation, a rebirth of the first moment, a way to make the king's Ka eternal, to keep the world's order intact. Halfway up the ramp, Ammonius stumbled, his foot catching on a loose stone, and I steadied him, my hand on his shoulder, the sledge rocking but holding. He grinned, sheepish, and I laughed, the sound soft but real, a spark in the morning's quiet. "Careful," I said, my voice warm, and he nodded, his hands tighter on the rope. We pushed on, the pyramid's side looming beside us, its stones warm under the sun, their edges so precise they seemed to hum with life. I wondered at it, the skill that fit them so perfectly, the hands that had shaped them without machines, without anything but chisels, levers, and belief. It was our will, I thought, our faith that made the impossible real. At the top of the ramp, we handed our block to the setters, men with steady hands and sharp eyes, who placed it with care, their movements slow, deliberate, as if each stone were a prayer. I watched, my breath catching, as the block settled, its edges flush, its surface smooth, a piece of the king's path to the gods. Ammonius stood beside me, his eyes wide, his voice a whisper. "It's perfect," he said, and I nodded, feeling the truth of it in my chest. The pyramid was perfect not because of the stone, but because of us, our hands, our hearts, our hope that shaped it, layer by layer, toward the stars. We rested at midday, the sun high, the air thick with heat, and the scent of bread passed among us. Neith was there, her hands busy with a basket of dates, her eyes on the pyramid, its sides glowing under the light. I sat near her, Ammonius at my side, and felt a question stir, quieter now, but still alive. "Why no machines?" I asked, my voice low, almost to myself. Couldn't they make it faster, easier? Neitha's gaze found mine, her smile soft, her eyes deep with knowing. "Machines have no breath," she said, her voice steady, like the Nile's flow. "They can't sing to the gods, can't carry the king's Ka. Your hands, your voice, your sweat, they're alive, they're sacred. That's why the pyramid will stand forever." Her words settled into me, warm and sure, like the stone under my hands. I thought of the chants we sang, the laughter we shared, the quiet moments by the fire. I thought of the pyramid, its shape a benben, its sides a ladder for the king's soul, its stones a testament to our belief. Machines could build, perhaps, but they couldn't believe, couldn't love, couldn't make the king's Ka eternal. Our hands did that, our hands and our hearts, weaving a story that would echo through the ages. The afternoon stretched on, the work relentless, the sun of fire above us, but I moved with a quiet strength, my hands sure, my steps steady. The pyramid was rising, its shape clearer, its purpose brighter, a chasm of stone that held the world's beginning and the king's forever. I looked at Ammonius, his face flushed, his grin unbroken, and felt a thread of connection. Not just to him, but to all of us, to the king, to the gods. We were building a truth, a path, a promise, and our hands were the only way to make it real. Maybe your breathing slows now like ours once did. Can you feel it? The stone's warmth, the ramp's steady rise? And perhaps that's why the pyramid shone so bright, because our hands carried the light of the gods. The morning was sharp and clear, the air crisp as I left the camp, the pyramid's silhouette catching the first rays of dawn, its edges glowing like a blade of light. My hands were steady now, the calluses thick, the stone's weight a familiar friend rather than a burden. Ammonius walked beside me, his steps quick, his chatter soft but constant, his eyes bright with the excitement that never seemed to fade. The plateau hummed with life, the workers' voices a low chorus, their tools clinking in rhythm, their shadows long and thin against the sand. I felt the pyramid's presence, not just as stone, but as a living thing, growing under our hands, its shape a quiet song that sang of the gods, of the king of eternity. Today was different, the overseer had said, his voice carrying a weight that made us pause by the fire last night. The casing stones had arrived, ferried across the Nile from the quarries of Turah, their surfaces smooth and white, polished to reflect the sun. They were the pyramid's skin, he'd said, the light that would make it a star on earth, a beacon for the king's Ka to find its way to Ra. I thought of them now, stacked near the base, their edges gleaming even in the half-light, and felt a shiver, not of cold, but of awe. The pyramid was becoming what it was meant to be, a benben, a ladder, a path shaped by our hands, our sweat, our belief. We reached the quarry, but our task was different today. Ammonius and I were sent to the base, where the casing stones waited, their surfaces cool under my fingers, their weight lighter than the rough blocks we'd hauled before. We worked with a new team, men with steady hands and quiet voices, their eyes sharp as they measured each stone, ensuring its fit, its angle, its place in the pyramid's perfect slope. The overseer was there, his staff still, his gaze intense, as if he could see the finished structure in the stones we laid. "Careful," he said, his voice low but firm. "These are the king's light. They must be flawless." Ammonius and I helped lift a casing stone, its surface slick and cold, onto a sledge, the wood groaning softly under its weight. We pulled it to the base, where the setters waited, their hands guiding it into place with a precision that made my breath catch. The stone settled, its edges flush, its surface gleaming, a piece of the sun made solid. I stepped back, Ammonius at my side, and looked at the row of casing stones, their white faces catching the dawn, their light a promise of what the pyramid would become. "It's beautiful," Ammonius whispered, his voice soft, almost reverent, and I nodded, my chest tight with a feeling I couldn't name. The work was slower today, each stone placed with care, each angle checked and rechecked, the chants softer, as if we feared to disturb the pyramid's growing light. I thought of Neitha's story, the benben, the mound that rose from chaos, and saw it in the casing stones, their smoothness a reflection of the world's first order, their shape a mirror of the sun's rays. The pyramid was more than a tomb, I realized. It was a creation, a rebirth of the divine, a way to make the king's Ka eternal, to keep the gods' balance in the world. And our hands alone, were the ones to shape it, because only we could carry the king's soul, only we could sing the prayers that lived in the stone. Ta joined us at midday, his hands dusty, his eyes bright as he watched the casing stones take their place. He sat beside me, his breath slow, his gaze on the pyramid, its base now lined with white, its sides still rough but promising light. "You see it now," he said, his voice low, not a question but a truth. I nodded, my hands cradling a bowl of water, my eyes on the stones that shone like the Nile under the sun. "It's the God's work," he continued, his fingers tracing the air, as if he could feel the pyramid's slope. "The shape, the light, the hands that build it, they're all one. The king will rise because we make it so." I thought of my village, my mother's baskets, my father's nets, the life I'd left to come here. I thought of the workers around me, their faces lined with dust, their hands rough but strong, their voices a chorus that carried the pyramid higher. I thought of the king, Khufu, somewhere in his palace, his ka waiting for the path we were building. Ta's words settled into me, warm and sure, like the stone under my hands. The pyramid's shape was the benben, the sun's rays, the stars' guide, and our hands were the God's hands, shaping a truth that would stand forever. The afternoon wore on, the sun climbing, the heat heavy, but the work felt lighter, the casing stones a promise that kept us moving. Ammonius stayed close, his grin steady, his hands quick, his chatter a soft thread that wove through the chants. I watched him, my heart warm, and felt a connection not just to him but to all of us, to the pyramid, to the king, to the gods. The structure was rising, its sides sharper, its light brighter, a chasm of stone that held the world's beginning and the king's forever. I touched a casing stone, its surface cool and smooth, and felt its light in my hands, my heart, my soul. As the sun began to dip, the pyramid glowed, its casing stones a band of light against the rough core, a promise of the star it would become. I stood with Ammonius, our work done for the day, our eyes on the structure, its shape a quiet prayer, its light a silent song. The overseer passed, his nod brief but warm, and I felt a quiet pride, a sense that we were part of something eternal, something that would outlast us all. "Are you still here with me? Can you see it? The casing stones gleam, the pyramid's growing light? And perhaps that's why the stones shone so white, to carry the king's ka on a river of light." The night was deep and still, the stars a river of light above the plateau, their glow casting faint shadows across the pyramid's rising form. I sat by the camp's edge, the sand cool beneath me, the fire's embers a soft pulse of warmth. Ammonius was asleep nearby, his breathing slow, his face softened by dreams, his small frame curled against the night's chill. The workers' voices had faded, the camp quiet now, save for the occasional crackle of a dying fire or the distant cry of a jackal in the desert. My hands rested in my lap, their calluses hard, their aches a quiet reminder of the day's labor, of the casing stones we'd placed, their white faces gleaming like the moon against the pyramid's core. The structure was changing, its sides smoother now, its shape sharper, a benben taking form under our hands. I thought of the casing stones, their light a promise, their precision a prayer, and felt a quiet awe settle into me, like the Nile's flow after a flood. The pyramid was more than stone. It was a story, a path, a truth we were building for the king, for the gods, for the world's order. I thought of Neitha's words, the benben rising from chaos, and Ta's, the sun's rays made solid. But tonight, under the stars, I felt a new question stir, soft but persistent, like the wind that whispered across the sand. Why did we believe so fiercely? Why did our hands, our hearts, our lives pour into this shape, this dream? A soft step broke my thoughts, and I turned to see Neith approaching, her shawl drawn tight, her eyes catching the starlight. She sat beside me, her movements slow, her hands folding in her lap, scarred and steady from years of work. She didn't speak at first, her gaze on the pyramid, its silhouette a dark chasm against the sky, its peak a silent call to the stars. "You're thinking," she said at last, her voice low, warm, like the embers at our feet. I nodded, my throat tight, unsure how to shape the question that burned in me. "Why do we do it?" I asked, my words soft, almost lost in the night. "Why do we believe the pyramid will carry the king's ka?" Neitha's smile was faint, her eyes distant, as if she saw something beyond the stone. "Because we see it," she said, her voice steady, like the Nile's current. "In the stars that return each night, in the Nile that floods and feeds, in the sun that rises without fail. The world is a cycle, a dance of life and death, and the king's Ka is part of it. The pyramid is his anchor, his path, shaped like the benben, like the sun's rays, to guide him through that dance." I listened, my breath slow, her words sinking into me, deep and cool, like water on parched earth. The pyramid wasn't just for the king, I realized, it was for all of us, a way to hold the cycle, to keep the world's balance. She gestured to the workers' camp, the sleeping forms, the fire's glow. "Our hands build it because we're part of the cycle too," she said. "Our work, our songs, our belief, they live in the stone. They carry the king's Ka, they make him eternal. Machines could never do that. They have no heart, no breath, no love." I thought of the chants we sang, the laughter we shared, the moments when our hands moved as one, pulling the sledges, placing the stones. I thought of Ammonius' grin, Ta's steady hands, the overseer's nod. Our hands were alive, our hands were sacred, and the pyramid was our offering, our prayer, our truth. Neith leaned back, her shawl slipping slightly, her eyes on the stars. "The king's Ka will feel it," she said, her voice a whisper now, almost a song. "It will know the hands that shaped its path, the hearts that sang for it, the love that built it." I nodded, my chest tight, my eyes burning with a quiet fire. I thought of my mother, her baskets by the Nile, her hands weaving stories into the reeds. I thought of my father, his nets cast in the dawn, his voice a prayer for the fish, for the gods. They'd sent me here to be part of this, to lend my hands to the pyramid, to the king's eternal journey. The stars seemed brighter now, their light a guide, and I felt the pyramid's shape in my heart. The benben, the sun's rays, the ladder to the gods. I thought of the casing stones, their white faces glowing, their smoothness a promise of the light to come. The pyramid was rising layer by layer under our hands, and I believed, not just in the king's Ka, but in us, in the cycle that bound us, in the truth we were building. Neitha's words were a thread, weaving me into the story, into the stone, into the stars, and I felt a quiet peace, like the Nile's flow, carrying me forward. I stood, the sand shifting under my feet, and Neith rose with me, her hand brushing my shoulder, warm and steady. "Sleep now," she said, her smile soft, her eyes kind. "The pyramid needs your hands tomorrow." I nodded, my heart full, and walked to my place by the fire, the embers glowing, Ammonius breathing a soft rhythm beside me. I lay down, the stars above, the pyramid in my dreams, its sides shining, its peak touching the heavens. I felt my hands in the stone, my heart in the light, my soul in the cycle that never ended, and I believed, with every breath, that the king's Ka would rise, because we made it so. Would you like to rest deeper in the next part? Can you feel it, the stars' light, the pyramid's quiet call? And perhaps that's why our hands sang with the stone, to weave the king's Ka into the cycle of the stars. The sun climbed high, its heat a fierce hand pressing against my back as I moved through the quarry, the air thick with dust and the sharp clink of chisels. My hands were steady, the stone's weight a rhythm I knew by heart, its edges no longer biting but familiar, like the call of a friend. Ammonius was at my side, his steps lighter now, his chatter a soft thread weaving through the workers' hum. The pyramid loomed before us, its casing stones gleaming at the base, their white faces a promise of light that spread upward, layer by layer, toward the peak that was closer now, though still a dream in the sky. I felt its presence, not just in my eyes, but in my chest, a quiet pulse that matched the beat of our steps, the chant of our voices, the belief that bound us. Today we worked higher on the ramps, the slope steeper, the air thinner, the pyramid sides rising sharp and sure around us. The casing stones were fewer here, their placement more precise, each one measured and cut to fit the narrowing slope, the benben's shape taking form before our eyes. I helped Ammonius guide a sledge, the stone smaller but heavier in its importance. its surface polished to a mirror's sheen. The setters waited above, their hands steady, their eyes sharp, their voices low as they called for the stone, their movements a dance of care and precision. I watched, my breath catching, as they eased it into place, its edges flush, its light blending with the others, a piece of the king's path to the gods. The overseer was there, his staff still, his gaze intense, but his voice softer today, almost gentle. "You're part of it now," he said, his eyes on me, on Ammonius, on the workers around us. "The pyramid carries your hands, your hearts." I nodded, my throat tight, feeling the truth of it in the ache of my muscles, the dust in my lungs, the light that glowed from the stones. The pyramid was ours, not just the king's, but all of ours, a creation born of our sweat, our songs, our belief that the king's Ka would rise, that the world's order would hold. I thought of Neitha's words, the Benben, the cycle of life and death, and felt it in the stone we placed, in the shape that pointed to the stars. Ammonius grinned, his face flushed, his hands steady on the rope, and I felt a warmth in my chest, a connection to him, to the workers, to the pyramid itself. We were a family, I realized, bound by the labor, the purpose, the hope that drove us. I thought of my village, my mother's baskets, my father's nets, the life I'd left behind. They were here with me, in my hands, in the stones, in the chants we sang to keep our steps in time. The pyramid was their story too, their belief, their offering to the gods, and I carried them with me, layer by layer, toward the heavens. At midday we rested, the sun afire above us, the air heavy with heat, and the scent of barley porridge passed among us. Ta sat nearby, his hands folded, his eyes on the pyramid, its casing stones now climbing higher, its shape sharper, its light brighter. I leaned close, my voice low, the question that had stirred under the stars still alive in me. "Why does it feel so real?" I asked, my words soft, almost a whisper. "Why do we believe the pyramid will carry him?" Ta's eyes met mine, his smile slow, his voice rough but warm, like the stone under my hands. "Because it's in us," he said. "The belief, the shape, the work, it's who we are. The pyramid is our heart, our hands, our hope. The king's Ka will rise because we believe it will, because we make it so." His words settled into me, deep and sure, like the Nile's flow after a flood. I thought of the Benben, the mound that rose from chaos, the sun's rays that fell in sharp beams, the stars that guided the king's soul. I thought of our hands, our chants, our laughter, the moments that wove us together, worker to worker, stone to stone, heart to heart. The pyramid was a truth, a cycle, a promise that life endured, that the king's Ka would climb to the gods because we believed, because our hands made it real. The afternoon stretched long, the heat relentless, but our work felt lighter, the casing stones a beacon that pulled us upward. Ammonius' chatter faded into quiet focus, his hands steady, his grin a spark that lit the ramp's steep climb. We moved as one, our ropes taut, our steps in rhythm, the pyramid's slope sharpening around us, its light growing brighter with each stone we placed. I thought of the Benben, its sacred mound, and saw it in the structure's form, its sides converging toward a single point, a path to the stars. I thought of the sun's rays, their sharp beams, and felt them in the casing stones, their white faces glowing, their smoothness a mirror for the divine. Ta's words lingered, a quiet song in my chest, and I felt the belief he spoke of. Not just in the king's Ka, but in us, in the hands that shaped the stone, the hearts that sang for it, the lives that poured into it. The pyramid was our heart, he'd said, and I understood it now, in the ache of my shoulders, the dust in my throat, the light that shone from the structure before us. We were building more than a tomb, we were building a cycle, a truth, a connection that bound us to the king, to the gods, to each other. Our hands alone, made it real, because they carried our breath, our prayers, our love. As the sun began to sink, the pyramid glowed, its casing stones a river of light that flowed upward, toward the peak that was closer now, a promise within reach. We paused, our work done for the day, our bodies weary but our spirits bright. Ammonius stood beside me, his eyes wide, his breath quick, as if he could see the king's Ka already climbing the pyramid's slope. "It's almost there," he whispered, his voice soft, almost a prayer, and I nodded, my hand on his shoulder, feeling the truth of it in my bones. The pyramid was almost complete, its shape a benben, its light a ladder, its stones a story we'd written with our hands. The overseer approached, his staff silent, his eyes warm, a rare smile softening his face. "You've done well," he said, his voice low, his gaze on the pyramid, its sides gleaming under the evening's glow. "The king will know. The gods see you." I felt a swell of pride, not just for myself, but for Ammonius, for Ta, for Neith, for all of us who'd given our hands, our hearts, our hope to this dream. The pyramid was ours, I realized, as much as it was the king's, a creation born of our belief, our labor, our love. We walked back to the camp, the air cooling, the stars beginning to bloom above. The pyramid stood behind us, its silhouette sharp against the sky, its light a quiet promise that would shine forever. I thought of my mother, her baskets by the Nile, her hands weaving stories into the reeds. I thought of my father, his nets cast in the dawn, his voice a prayer for the gods. They were here, in the stones, in the chants, in the belief that sent me to this plateau, to this pyramid, to this truth. I thought of the king, his Ka waiting, and felt a quiet certainty that he would rise, that he would climb the benben we'd built, because our hands, our hearts, our hope made it so. The camp was alive with soft sounds, fires crackling, voices murmuring, laughter rising like sparks into the night. Ammonius yawned, his steps slowing, but his grin held, a light that matched the pyramid's glow. I ruffled his hair, my heart warm, and found my place by the fire, the sand soft beneath me, the stars a canopy above. The pyramid was in my dreams that night, its sides shining, its peak touching the heavens, and I felt my hands in the stone, my heart in the light, my soul in the cycle that bound us all. The king's Ka would rise, I believed, because our hands shaped a path that could never fade. Are you still here with me? Can you feel it, the pyramid's glow, the workers' quiet pride? And perhaps that's why the benben pointed so high, to carry our hands to the stars with the king. The dawn was a soft blush, a gentle hand of light brushing the plateau, as I walked toward the pyramid, its casing stones now climbing high, their white faces glowing like a river of stars trapped in stone. My hands were steady, the calluses a map of the work I'd done, the stones I'd carried, the path I'd helped shape. Ammonius was beside me, his steps quick, his eyes bright, though his chatter was quieter today, as if the pyramid's near completion had woven a spell of reverence over us all. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of dust and distant water, and the workers' hum was softer, their movements slower, their voices hushed, as if we stood at the edge of a sacred moment. The pyramid was almost finished, its peak within reach, its shape a perfect benben, its sides converging toward a single point that seemed to pierce the sky. Today we worked on the highest ramps, the air thinner, the stones smaller but heavier with meaning, each one a step closer to the king's eternal path. The overseer had spoken last night, his voice low by the fire of the capstone, the final stone, the pyramid ion, that would crown the structure, its surface sheathed in gold to catch the sun's first light. I thought of it now, imagining its gleam, a beacon for the king's Ka, a star on earth to guide him to Ra. My heart quickened, not with effort, but with awe, a quiet fire that burned in my chest. Ammonius and I helped carry a casing stone, its surface polished to a mirror's sheen, its weight light but sacred, like a prayer held in our hands. The ramp was steep, the path narrow, the pyramid's sides rising sharp and smooth around us, their light almost blinding under the morning sun. We moved carefully, our steps in rhythm, our breaths a shared pulse, the setters waiting above, their hands steady, their eyes sharp, their voices low as they guided the stone into place. I watched, my breath catching, as it settled, its edges flush, its light blending with the others, a piece of the benben, a step for the king's soul to climb. The overseer stood nearby, his staff still, his gaze soft but intense, as if he could see the king's Ka already rising through the pyramid's slope. "This is the end," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper, his eyes on the peak, where the capstone would soon rest. "The beginning, too." I nodded, my throat tight, feeling the truth of it in the dust on my skin, the ache in my hands, the light that shone from the stones. The pyramid was complete, or nearly so, its shape a ladder, its light a path, its stones a story we'd written with our hands, our hearts, our belief. Todd joined us at midday, his hands dusty, his eyes bright, his smile slow but warm, like the sun's touch on the casing stones. We rested near the peak, the air cooler here, the plateau sprawling below, the Nile a silver thread in the distance. Ammonius sat close, his knees drawn up, his eyes on the pyramid's top, where the capstone's place waited, empty but ready. I looked at Ta, my voice soft, the question that had grown through the days still alive in me. "Will it be enough?" I asked, my words quiet, almost lost in the breeze. "Will the pyramid carry him to the gods?" Ta's gaze met mine, his eyes deep, his voice rough but sure, like the stone we'd shaped. "It will," he said, his hand gesturing to the pyramid, its sides gleaming, its shape perfect. "The Benben holds the world's beginning. The sun's rays carry its light, and our hands carry the king's Ka. We've built it with love, with belief, with the cycle that binds us all. He will rise because we've made it so." His words sank into me, warm and deep, like the Nile's flow, and I felt the belief he spoke of, not just in my mind, but in my heart, in the hands that had shaped the stone, in the soul that had sung for it. I thought of Neitha's stories, the Benben rising from chaos, the stars guiding the king's Ka. I thought of the workers, their chants, their laughter, their hands that moved as one, pulling the sledges, placing the stones. I thought of my mother, her baskets by the Nile, her hands weaving hope into the reeds. I thought of my father, his nets cast in the dawn, his voice a prayer for the gods. They were all here in the pyramid, in the light, in the cycle that bound us to the king, to the stars, to eternity. The pyramid was our heart, our hands, our hope, and it was enough, I believed, because we believed. The afternoon wore on, the ramps quieter now, the stones fewer, the pyramid's peak closer, its light brighter. Ammonius stayed close, his grin steady, his hands quick, his eyes on the top, as if he could see the capstone already gleaming. I watched him, my heart warm, and felt a connection, not just to him but to all of us, to the pyramid, to the king, to the gods. The structure was complete, its shape a Benben, its light a ladder, its stones a testament to our belief. I touched a casing stone, its surface cool and smooth, and felt its light in my hands, my heart, my soul, a promise that would shine forever. As the sun began to dip, the pyramid glowed, its casing stones a sea of light that flowed upward, toward the peak that waited for its crown. I stood with Ammonius, our work done for the day, our eyes on the structure, its shape a silent prayer, its light a quiet song. The overseer passed, his nod brief but warm, and I felt a pride, a connection, a sense that we were part of something eternal, something that would carry the king's Ka, our hands, our hearts, to the stars. Are you still here with me? Can you see it, the pyramid's peak, the light that waits for the capstone? And perhaps that's why the stones sang so bright, to call the king's Ka to its golden crown. The morning was still, the air heavy with the weight of anticipation, as I stood at the base of the pyramid, its casing stones now a seamless cloak of light, their white faces gleaming under the dawn's first touch. My hands were steady, the calluses a testament to the stones I'd carried, the path I'd helped shape, but today they trembled, not with fatigue, but with a quiet awe that pulsed in my chest. Ammonius was beside me, his eyes wide, his breath quick, his usual chatter silenced by the moment we all felt approaching. The pyramid was complete, its Benben shape perfect, its sides converging to a peak that pierced the sky, waiting for its final crown. The pyramid ion, the capstone that would seal the king's path to the gods. The plateau was alive with a hushed energy. The workers gathered in a great circle, their faces lined with dust, their eyes bright with pride, their voices soft but vibrant, like the Nile's murmur at dusk. The ramps had been dismantled, their earth and mud bricks smoothed away, leaving the pyramid's slopes sharp and unbroken, a ladder of light that seemed to draw the stars closer, even in the morning's glow. The overseer stood at the center, his staff raised, his voice a low rumble that carried across the crowd. "Today," he said, his eyes on the peak, "we place the capstone. Today, the King's Ka finds its path." A murmur rose, a wave of sound that was both prayer and song, and I felt it in my bones, a connection to the workers, to the pyramid, to the king, to the gods. The capstone had arrived, ferried from the quarries, its surface sheathed in gold, its edges polished to a mirror's sheen, a star-made stone to crown the benben. It rested on a sledge at the base, small but heavy with meaning, its light catching the sun, a beacon that seemed to hum with the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. I thought of Neitha's stories, the benben rising from chaos, the sun's rays made solid, and saw it in the capstone, a piece of the divine, a guide for the King's Ka to climb. Ammonius and I were chosen, among others, to help carry the capstone, our hands steady, our steps careful, as we pulled the sledge to the final ramp, a narrow path that wound to the peak. The stone was light compared to the blocks we'd hauled before, but its weight was sacred, a prayer held in our hands, a promise shaped by our belief. The workers chanted, their voices low and steady, a rhythm that matched our steps, that seemed to lift the sledge, to carry it upward, toward the heavens. I felt the pyramid's presence, its light wrapping around us, its shape a benben, a ladder, a path that we'd built with our hands, our hearts, our hope. The climb was slow, the ramp steep, the air thin, but we moved as one, our ropes taut, our breaths a shared pulse, the capstone gleaming before us, a star leading the way. Ammonius' grin was gone, replaced by a quiet focus, his eyes on the peak, his hands tight on the rope, as if he could will the stone into place. I thought of Ta's words, the pyramid as our heart, our hands, our hope, and felt them in the capstone, in the chant, in the light that glowed from the pyramid's sides. We were building more than a tomb, we were building a cycle, a truth, a connection that bound us to the king, to the gods, to eternity. At the peak, the setters waited, their hands steady, their eyes sharp, their voices soft as they guided the capstone into place. I watched, my breath catching, as it settled, its edges flush, its gold surface blazing under the sun. A star on earth, a crown for the benben. The workers' chant rose, a wave of sound that seemed to lift the pyramid, to carry the King's Ka toward the gods. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, not for sadness, but for the beauty of it, the truth of it, the belief that had shaped this moment, this path, this light. The overseer raised his staff, his voice a thunder that cut through the chant. "It is done," he said, his eyes on the capstone, its light a beacon that seemed to touch the sky. "The king's path is ready. The gods see us." A cheer rose, a sound of joy and pride, and I joined it, my voice raw, my heart full, my hands raised to the pyramid, to the capstone, to the stars that would guide the King's Ka. Ammonius' grin returned, brighter now, his eyes shining, and I ruffled his hair, my chest tight with a connection that bound us, worker to worker, heart to heart. We descended the ramp, the pyramid glowing behind us, its light a river that flowed upward, its shape a benben, a ladder, a truth. I thought of my mother, her baskets by the Nile, her hands weaving hope into the reeds. I thought of my father, his nets cast in the dawn, his voice a prayer for the gods. They were here in the capstone, in the light, in the cycle that bound us all. I thought of the king, his Ka waiting, and felt a quiet certainty that he would rise, that he would climb the benben we built, because our hands, our hearts, our belief made it so. The workers gathered at the base, their voices soft now, their eyes on the pyramid, its capstone blazing, a star that would shine forever. Neith was there, her shawl drawn tight, her smile warm, her eyes deep with knowing. She met my gaze, her nod brief but sure, and I felt her stories in me, the benben, the sun's rays, the cycle that never ended. The pyramid was complete, its path ready, its light eternal, and we were part of it. Our hands, our hearts, our hope woven into the stone, into the stars, into the kings forever. Are you still here with me? Can you see it? The capstone's gleam, the pyramid's eternal light? And perhaps that's why the Benben shone so bright, to carry the king's Ka on a star of our hands. The sun rose high, its light a golden crown that bathed the pyramid, its capstone blazing like a star caught on earth, its white casing stones a river of light flowing upward to the heavens. I stood at the base, my hands still, the calluses a map of the journey we'd walked, the stones we'd carried, the truth we'd shaped. Ammonius was beside me, his eyes wide, his breath slow, his silence a testament to the moment's weight. The pyramid's completion a quiet song that hummed in our bones. The plateau was still, the workers gathered in a loose circle, their faces lined with dust, their eyes bright with pride, their voices hushed, as if the structure itself demanded reverence. Its Benben shape a perfect ladder, its peak a point that pierced the sky. The air was warm now, carrying the scent of sand and distant water. The Nile a silver thread in the distance, its flow a reminder of the cycle that bound us. Life, death, rebirth. The overseer stood before us, his staff planted in the sand, his gaze on the pyramid, its light a beacon that seemed to call the gods themselves. "It is done," he said again, his voice low but resonant, like the echo of a drum in the desert's quiet. "The king's path is complete. His Ka will rise, because your hands, your hearts, your belief have made it so." A murmur rose, a soft wave of sound, not a cheer now, but a prayer, a song that wove us together, worker to worker, heart to heart, stone to stone. I looked at the pyramid, its sides smooth, its capstone gleaming, and felt a stillness in my chest, not heavy, but deep, like the silence after a storm. The Benben was complete, its shape the mound that rose from chaos, the sun's rays made solid, the stars guide for the king's Ka. I thought of Neitha's stories, her voice by the fire, speaking of the world's beginning, of the cycle that never ended. I thought of Ta's words, the pyramid as our heart, our hands, our hope, and felt them in the light that shone from the stones, in the belief that pulsed through us all. The pyramid was more than a tomb, it was a truth, a path, a promise that the king's Ka would climb to the gods, because we believed, because our hands made it real. Ammonius tugged at my hand, his grin soft but bright, his eyes on the capstone, its gold catching the sun's fire. "He'll see it, won't he?" he asked, his voice a whisper, almost lost in the breeze. "The king's Ka. He'll know we built this for him?" I looked at him, his face open, his heart full, and felt a warmth in my chest, a connection that bound us, not just to each other, but to the pyramid, to the king, to the gods. "He'll know," I said, my voice steady, my hand on his shoulder. "The Ka carries everything, our hands, our songs, our love. He'll feel it, in the stars, in the light, in the Benben we've built." Neith approached, her shawl loose now, her eyes deep with knowing, her smile warm as she stood beside us. She didn't speak, but her gaze was on the pyramid, its light a mirror for the sun, its shape a ladder for the king's soul. I thought of her stories, the Benben rising from chaos, the cycle that bound us all, and felt them in the stones, in the light, in the quiet pride that filled the plateau. Ta was there too, his hands folded, his eyes bright, his smile slow but sure, like the stone he'd shaped for years. The overseer nodded to us, his staff still, his face softened by a pride that matched our own, and I felt a thread of connection, a tapestry woven from our hands, our hearts, our hope. The workers began to disperse, their steps slow, their voices soft, their eyes lingering on the pyramid, its light a promise that would stand forever. I stayed, Ammonius at my side, our feet rooted in the sand, our hearts full with the weight of what we'd done. I thought of my mother, her baskets by the Nile, her hands weaving hope into the reeds. I thought of my father, his nets cast in the dawn, his voice a prayer for the gods. They were here, in the pyramid, in the capstone, in the light that shone from the Benben, in the cycle that bound us to the king, to the stars, to eternity. I thought of the king, his Ka waiting, and felt a quiet certainty that he would rise, that he would climb the path we'd built, because our hands, our hearts, our belief made it so. The sun climbed higher, its light warm on my skin, and I felt the pyramid's presence, not just in my eyes, but in my soul, a truth that would echo through the ages. I looked at Ammonius, his grin a spark, his eyes a mirror for the capstone's glow, and smiled. A small, quiet thing, like a lotus opening to the dawn. The Nile sang in the distance, its flow a reminder of the cycle that never ended, and I knew I'd carry this moment, this pyramid, this belief, in my hands, my heart, my dreams. The workers' voices faded, the plateau grew quiet, and I stood, my breath slow, my heart steady, my soul light, believing in a world where the king's Ka would rise, where our hands had shaped a path that could never fade. The path back to the camp was familiar, its curves known to my feet, and I let it carry me, Ammonius at my side, the pyramid behind us, its light a star that would shine forever. I thought of the future, of others who might stand here, their hands touching the stones, their eyes tracing the Benben's shape, their hearts wondering at the king who lay within. They would feel it, I hoped, the belief that bound us, the cycle that held us, the love that made the pyramid real. The stars began to bloom above, their light a guide, and I walked on, my heart full, my soul woven into the Benben, into the king's forever, into the light that never faded. Are your eyes getting heavy yet? Can you see it, the capstone's blaze, the pyramid's eternal truth? And perhaps that's why the pyramid stood so tall, because our hands wove the king's Ka into the stars.